The Iron Throne cut him for 26 years. It opened his hands, it sliced his arms, it took 2 of his fingers. And still, every morning, the king climbed back up and sat down on 1,000 swords, because that was what kings did. But the throne was not what killed him. What killed him was something far quieter. He loved his daughter. He loved his wife. He loved the brother who defied him, the sons who threatened everything he had built, and the peace he held together with nothing but hope and silence. And in the end, every one of those loves became a blade. Welcome to Westeros Within, where we journey into forgotten ages, hidden legends, and ancient mysteries. This is Blood of the Dragon. Episode 5, Viserys I Targaryen, when a father broke the realm. Viserys came to the throne after the Great Council of 101. The Lords had chosen him over Princess Rhaenys and her son, Leonor, establishing a clear principle. The Iron Throne passes through the male line. Viserys accepted that crown, and then he broke the very rule that gave it to him. It began with death. His queen, Aemma had suffered years of difficult pregnancies, stillbirths, miscarriages, a son who lived only a day. When she died in 105 AC, delivering another child who did not survive, Viserys was shattered. And in that grief, his brother Daemon was seen in a brothel on the Street of Silk, toasting the dead infant as the heir for a day. Whether Daemon meant it cruelly or drunkenly, the damage was done. Viserys exiled him, and in the same breath, he named his daughter Rhaenyra as Princess of Dragonstone, his heir, a girl of 8. Not because the law demanded it, not because the council agreed, because he loved her, and because the alternative was the brother who had laughed at his pain. Every lord in the realm was summoned to kneel before Rhaenyra and swear an oath to defend her succession. Hundreds knelt, hundreds swore, and not one of them would keep that oath when the time came. But that was the future. In the present, there was something more immediate: Alicent Hightower. She came to Viserys in his grief, young, patient, gentle. She read to him. She sat with him while he worked on his model of Old Valyria, a miniature city he built piece by piece in his solar, a dream of a world that no longer existed. She was warm. She listened. She understood. What Viserys did not understand was that her father, Otto Hightower, the Hand of the King, had sent her. It was the most elegant political maneuver in Targaryen history. Otto placed his daughter at the king's side the way a general places a siege tower against a wall, carefully, patiently, and with a very specific target in mind. In 106 AC, Viserys married Alicent, and in doing so, he made 2 enemies in a single day: Daemon, who had expected to be named heir, and Lord Corlys Velaryon, whose daughter Helaena had been passed over for the match. The 2 most powerful men outside the throne, alienated at once. But Viserys did not see enemies. He saw a wife, a family, a second chance. The sons came quickly: Aegon, Helaena, Aemond, and later, Daeron. Every child Alicent bore was a crack in the wall Viserys had built around Rhaenyra's claim, because the realm now faced an impossible question. The king had named his daughter as heir, but he had also sired sons, and every precedent in Westerosi law said sons come first. The lords waited for Viserys to change his mind. He never did. He was, as the histories say, unwavering. When he made a choice, he stood by it. When Otto Hightower pressed him to name Aegon as heir instead, Viserys dismissed him as Hand. When Alicent pressed the issue, he silenced it. When his own council questioned the succession, he reminded them of the oaths, as if words spoken by men who feared a king would still bind them once the king was dead. Meanwhile, Rhaenyra had married Lenor Velaryon, a political masterstroke that united the 2 branches of the royal family. There was one difficulty. Lenor preferred the company of men. It was an open secret. Rhaenyra bore 3 sons: Jacaerys, Lucerys, Joffrey. All 3 had brown hair, brown eyes, and pug noses, None had the silver hair or purple eyes of either the Targaryens or the Valerians. The father was said to be Sir Harwin Strong, the commander of the City Watch, a fine knight, a strong man, and very obviously not Laenor Velaryon. The realm whispered, the court knew, and the king did nothing. When young Aemond called his nephews the strong boys to their faces, Lucerys slashed out Aemond's eye with a knife. Viserys was presented with a crisis that demanded resolution, a legitimate grievance from one side, an unspoken truth from the other, and his answer was to decree that anyone who questioned the boys' parentage would lose their tongue. He did not investigate the claim, he punished the question, and beneath it all, two factions hardened like iron cooling in a forge. They called themselves the Greens and the Blacks. It began at a tournament in 111 AC when Alicent wore a gown of Hightower green and Rhaenyra wore Targaryen black and red. After that night, the court divided. Families chose sides. Men who had shared wine began to plan for war. The Greens followed Alicent, Otto, Aegon, Aemond, and Sir Criston Cole, the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, a man who had once loved Rhaenyra and now despised her. The Blacks followed Rhaenyra, Daemon, the Velaryon fleet, and the promise of a queen who had been named Heir since she was a child. And between them sat Viserys, growing older, growing weaker, losing pieces of himself to the throne that had never stopped cutting. In 126 AC, after ordering a man's tongue removed for calling his grandsons bastards, Viserys sliced his hand to the bone on the Iron Throne. 2 fingers were amputated. He never sat the throne again. He spent his final years in bed. The model of old Valyria gathered dust in his solar. Otto Hightower, reinstated as Hand, ran the kingdom. The Greens filled the council. The Blacks waited on Dragonstone. And Viserys refused to see any of it. He died in his sleep on the 3rd day of the 3rd moon of 129 AC. 52 years old, 26 years on the throne, the last rider of Balerion the Black Dread, and the only Targaryen king in this age who never had a living dragon. The throne he sat for a quarter century had rejected him from the very beginning. But the true cruelty was not his death. It was what came after. A servant, instructed by Alicent, told the queen before anyone else. By morning, Otto Hightower had convened the small council. Only one man spoke for Rhaenyra, Lord Beesbury, 80 years old, who rose from his chair and declared he would not sit while they stole a dead man's promise. He was the first to die. For 7 days, the Greens hid the king's death. They secured the treasury. They sealed the gates. They found Aegon, reluctant, confused, dragged from a brothel, some say, and they crowned him in the dragon pit with the conqueror's crown. By the time a raven reached Dragonstone, it was already done. The throne Viserys had bled for was taken before his body was cold, and the war he spent 26 years pretending would never come had already begun. So tell me this, was Viserys a good father who failed as a king, or a weak king who failed everyone? Write it in the comments. And if you want to hear what happened next, when 2 crowns were placed on 2 heads, when a son was murdered above a storm, and when revenge came in the darkest room in the Red Keep, subscribe to Westeros Within and join me for the next chapter. Because next time, the dance of the dragons begins, and no one survives it clean.